So we've seen this sell-off in oil. Our guest thinks, though, that it's possible that the market is complacent about geopolitical risk and the possible threat to Mideast supplies. We're joined by Helima Croft, Head of Global Commodity Strategy at RBC Capital Markets. Helima, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we saw this Hamas leader, Haniyeh, killed in Tehran. Latest I've seen is that Israel has not confirmed that it did it, but I may be out of date there. I'm working off the BBC. But you say that was a particularly striking assassination. Why was that?
I mean, we're following this story very carefully. I mean, obviously, oil has had a very tough day today because of all the renewed concerns about the economic outlook, both in the United States, continued concerns about Asian demand. But we are bracing over the weekend for a potential Iranian and Hezbollah retaliation for the string of assassinations that we have seen this week, as you mentioned, targeting the head of Hamas's political operations. He had left Qatar for Tehran for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. Obviously, a major security breach of the Revolutionary Guard. Also, the senior Hezbollah commander that was killed just before that. And so everything we're hearing indicates that we are likely looking at some form of retaliation that really exceeds what we did see in April. So the market is very focused, obviously, on the broader economic story at present. That's really hurting oil. But we would say don't take your eye off what's also happening in the Middle East.
Because apparently he was deeply involved in the ceasefire and hostage release talks from his base in Qatar. So, I mean, it raises questions about how is Israel eager for a settlement?
I mean, it raises questions about, as you just mentioned, does Israel believe that they have to essentially continue down this path in terms of, particularly when it comes to Lebanon as well, when I bring up the Hezbollah killing, because the Israelis have not indicated yet that they have taken Lebanon operation off the table. They've said even if there's a ceasefire with Hamas, which looks increasingly tenuous after this killing, as you just mentioned, but the thing that we're all watching is the potential ground offenses that we could see in Lebanon. And that has been a source of grave concern to the White House, who believes that if you do have this expand to Lebanon in earnest, that is a pathway to a wider war, because Hezbollah is Iran's most important proxy. So again, why people are particularly concerned about what could happen in the next 48 hours is you could see potentially both Iran and Hezbollah engage in retaliation against Israel, potentially targeting strategic assets in Tel Aviv, and also we're potentially hearing Haifa as well, the major Israeli port.
Talk to us about the U.S. election. I mean, if Mr. Trump is re-elected, of course, he's likely to encourage U.S. oil production, and that's bearish for the price in theory.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's something, if you looked at the Republican convention, they ran on to drill, baby, drill was part of the platform, potentially defunding the IRA and then the electric vehicle mandate on day one. But if you look at the Biden administration, they came into office all about, the energy transition, obviously killing Keystone XL, going back into Paris Climate Accords, but U.S. production climbed to record levels under the Biden administration as well. So it's an interesting question about how much policy in Washington will impact the sector and how much geology and the appetite of investors to see U.S. production grow. I would say, though, that what could be interesting with President Trump is where does he come down on issues like sanctions? Is he more willing, for example, to take a tougher line on Iranian oil exports? Would he be tougher on Venezuelan oil exports? So it's interesting. On the one hand, you could say he'll be more supportive of the U.S. oil and gas industry, but he could also sanction key energy producers.
And then Kamala Harris, the most likely Democratic candidate, you reckon she is more green than President Biden, certainly when it comes to energy transition?
I mean, she certainly ran in 2019 to the left of President Biden. She called for a fracking ban. She was one of the original co-sponsors of the Green New Deal. When she was Attorney General for California, she sued energy companies. She sued actually the Obama Interior Ministry in 2016 to prevent fracking off the California coast. So if you look at both her record and what she campaigned on, you would put her in more of the progressive camp on energy policy. But given where we stand in a very, very tight electoral contest and the need to win Pennsylvania, which is a very important fracking state for gas, we are not expecting that she's going to run as an anti-fracking candidate, given that there's probably no path to victory or little path to victory for Democrats if they cannot win Pennsylvania.
And as you know, she has since backed away from a ban on fracking. Yeah.
Yes, she did. Yes.
And then OPEC Plus, you call it, I think you call it a taper tantrum, of course, because we saw that in this summer. They said they might be tapering their cutbacks, in other words. But then they were quick to do a turnaround and say, well, we won't necessarily increase production. How do you think OPEC Plus will play it?
I think what's so interesting about that June meeting is that if you just looked at the statement, you would say, okay, full steam ahead with phasing out this voluntary cut. But as soon as they had their press conference, they were very quick to qualify that they could pause it. It would be market determined, that they would not move ahead if market conditions were trending in a negative way. And certainly we just had the meeting this week of OPEC's management committee. And while they did not issue production guidance for the fourth quarter, they did restate that they could pause or reverse the taper depending on the market outlook. So I think OPEC is going to remain extremely judicious. I do not believe that they are going to start putting barrels into a market that's deteriorating. So if the current concerns about the direction of the U.S. economy, Asian demand persist, I do not see OPEC adding barrels into this market, oversupplying the market.
Because it does appear that Asian demand is underwhelming right now.
It has been underwhelming. So again, I think these are the absolute factors that OPEC will take into consideration when they make the final decision about whether to proceed with bringing more barrels back in the fourth quarter.
There's so many strands to this. I mean, if Kamala Harris won the presidency, you think she would be keen to renew an approach to Iran in return for allowing more oil onto the market? She'd want to see a nuclear deal?
Well, some of her top advisors, most notably Phil Gordon, who's her national security advisor, he is one of the original architects of that Iranian nuclear agreement from 2015. So we could expect, I think, a renewal of the outreach towards Iran. Now, what's interesting, though, is depending on what happens this weekend, that could change, because certainly if you see a very tough Iranian response targeting Israel, that could be something that could inhibit a new rapprochement with Iran. So a lot, I think, is going to hinge on how does Iran, how does Hezbollah, its key proxy, respond to the events that we've seen this week in terms of the assassinations of their key officials.